today. Honorable Minister, delegates, dear friends. Let me give you a very quick context and bias on where I'm coming from. So I run Persistent Systems, which is a software company based out of Pune. I'm predominantly a database guy and I work a lot in the database area. I'm also a founding member of iSpirit, and I'm going to talk a bit about the India Stack and how it relates to some of the work that's going on. I'm also I'm a part-time member at the UID Authority of India. And I'm not talking on behalf of UID Authority of India, but from various conversations and discussion, it's clear that there are gaps in terms of how people perceive Aadhaar and all that stuff. So I'm going to try to explain a bit of the nuances of what the Aadhaar Act talks about and how that relates to some of the things that you might want to consider as you make decisions in the future. So there was a very nice discussion very recently by the Honorable Minister for Information Technology and Law, Mr. Ravi Shankar Prasad, in the Rajya Sabha about a week back, where he really explained very well about what the Aadhaar can do and should not do. And maybe a good thing to look at. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this. Perhaps you are aware that Aadhaar is now supported by an Aadhaar Act which came in 2016 March. And many of the things that I'm going to share with you today are from the Act, and I'm going to give you excerpts from it, but the Act is available online, and I highly recommend looking through the provisions of the Act before using Aadhaar for various kinds of contexts within the healthcare space. So this is something you know for sure, but I want to make another comment here in this, that typically when you try to get an Aadhaar number, you are giving to an authorized agent biometric information, which includes your 10 fingerprints, 2 iris, and a photograph. And you give a set of demographics information, such as name, date of birth, age, address, mobile number, and email address. And this is not a verified data, it's self-certified data. So the Aadhaar agent is not expected to verify your address or any of those kinds of things. It's just taking what you are giving them. But the biometric part is verified. It generates a 12-digit unique number which is deduplicated on the basis of the biometric data. So it is, if you give different names, different numbers, but the same biometric data, you will not get a different Aadhaar number. So that's the important thing to know. It is not a proof of citizenship. So all you need to be is a resident of India to get an Aadhaar number. And that's pretty much all there is to it. Now, I'll not go through this, but the Aadhaar database as such, which is what is maintained by the UID Authority of India, only keeps very minimal information by design. So we do not have any other information beyond just the Aadhaar number, your biometric, and some demographic information. As I said, encrypted data is collected to a central location from by the UID Authority of India, and validation is done through authorized devices, and you get one UID number. One other important point to note is that there is no concept of deleting an Aadhaar number. So even if somebody is dead, that number will remain forever. It's not going to go away. When you look at Aadhaar validation, the important thing again here is that the Aadhaar system is only capable of giving you yes/no answers. So you give it a 12-digit Aadhaar ID and your biometric, and all it can say is yes or no, nothing more than that. So it is not possible to search through by just looking at biometrics or some other things, or returning biometric ever from the system. So we never return biometrics. And the other point to note is that the biometric information that you are collecting in authorized devices is encapsulated in an encrypted package sent over a private network to the Aadhaar database. So it's not really possible for you to hold on to these biometrics, and if you choose to do that, it's actually a violation of the Aadhaar Act. There is, for convenience, another setup was created called eKYC, where you will get back, if you give the Aadhaar number and the biometric, your demographic information. But again, it's not validated or verified, it's the database entries that exist in the database. Now, one of the few questions that people have been asking, and it's worth asking, is what really is identity? Is the demographic information enough? Do you, for a bank account, do you need to have the demographic information, or the fact that I'm saying who I am and I'm going to keep saying I'm the same person every time I show up, that particular link of individual identity is really what Aadhaar is trying to provide. Everything else kind of is supporting this particular premise. As I said, UIDAI has very minimal information, and the Aadhaar system does not return biometric, does not keep any other information. And Aadhaar system has no ability to add any other health information, health ID, any of those things. They don't come inside the Aadhaar system at all. Neither will the PAN cards come into the Aadhaar system. There are many provisions for privacy, I think, which are important that people should look at when you look at Aadhaar usage. So one of the things is that when you are using Aadhaar, you are expected to give consent to use for a single use of Aadhaar for whatever you said you are going to use it for and not use it for anything else. And it's the responsibility of those who are collecting Aadhaar information to ensure that they are using it per consent that they have, and they are supposed to manage that consent. Okay. The core biometric as such cannot be collected by anybody else, and these Aadhaar numbers are to be not shared openly and freely, because that again is a violation of the Aadhaar Act. And if you look at the Aadhaar website, it will talk about some of these kinds of things as saying you should not be sharing Aadhaar numbers freely, because that's the law. And that's what the Act provides for. Okay? So this is just a quick overview of what Aadhaar is. Now, having said that Aadhaar is very limited to storing individual identity and tracking identity across the world, across timelines, and it's unique and all of those things, it in itself becomes a very powerful mechanism to do many other things that are surrounded by other features that are not necessarily part of what the UID Authority of India is doing. UID Authority of India, as part of Aadhaar, is managing just this basic stuff, but that becomes the key or a way to get to other information. Okay. So what you see in the market right now is around India Stack, and this is something that been part of as part of the iSpirit work. And there are some very nice presentations online and available. One is by Nandan around internet banking, and Pramod Verma has written a bunch of things around how to use the Aadhaar infrastructure. But very simplistically, there are 4 layers that the India Stack is trying to build up. And I think it's worth thinking through some of these activities that are happening and integrate them in the healthcare context. So one is the presence-less layer, which means if I say who I am once, every time I should be able to do it, and that includes Aadhaar authentication followed by things like e-signatures and a bunch of other things. I would like to recommend that everyone should take a look at Digital Locker that has been released. I don't know if you have tried setting up your own Digital Locker, but it is something that is already available. There is a Digital Locker Authority, and a lot of that has to do with creating paperless, repository of your personal records, which are integrated with Aadhaar but are not part of Aadhaar. So when you're keeping it there, it's not that they're kept in the UID Authority database, they're kept separately, and there is a whole mechanism of how that's happening. The cashless layer that you're familiar with is stuff that is coming out of UPI, and that's the BHIM and everything else that is coming up, all sort of links to Aadhaar, but it's not Aadhaar. And finally, there is a consent layer that is under construction, which will help you track consent on what you are allowing people to share, and those sort of setting it up for a potentially privacy-related data exchange, which may be relevant for the healthcare data that we look at. I have limited time right now, so I'm going to rush through some of these things, but these slides are all available in various literature around India Stack. But in the last 6 months, potentially after demonetization, the effect of the India Stack has started to become very visible, and a lot more people are starting to see this, especially driven by BHIM and UPI, which is going to be a major game changer. The kind of infrastructure that we have in India with Aadhaar and India Stack is not available anywhere else in the world. And it's quite phenomenal, and it's going to cause a huge revolution in the way data is going to get exchanged and managed. And I highly encourage that as you look at healthcare related records, let's see how to bring these together in the context of what's happening on India Stack, because a lot of this work has already happened and it's very leverageable. Very quickly, the Digital Authority, Locker Authority has lots of documents that people are already saving. and this may be just one last mention here, is that when you issue documents that are stored in the digital locker, they're not necessarily you copying your data into that, but it's actually, let's say if it's your driving license, the driving license authority is making that potential pointer available in your digital locker, where the data is kept with the authority that issues that data, but it's available to you through your digital locker so that you can share it without having to give a printed paper which is attested. I'm going to skip through some of these slides here. Again, UPI is another interesting thing, and this may be something to think about. When you're looking at and sharing UPI addresses, while it is connected to Aadhaar, you don't need to give your Aadhaar number. There is a UPI address that is created, and you can have multiple UPI addresses even though it's connected to the same Aadhaar account. And that's something you may want to think about in the context of healthcare records as well, because do you really want to share everything the way you want to do it? Now, there is a strong belief, and I'm part of the camp where, I think we have to look at privacy and privacy-related act as an important part before we go too far on trying to collect everybody's information. I think it's not appropriate for us to just assume that the government should have all the data about everybody for everything. And I think there needs to be proper protection for making sure that this is happening. I'm going to just stop here. There are a bunch of other examples here, but I'm going to stop here and encourage you all to look at a lot of the work that is going on in the context of India Stack. And on the Aadhaar side also, there is a lot of maturity now on the Act. The Act is very clear in terms of what it can and what it cannot do. It's an extremely useful infrastructure, but needs to be protected and used effectively. If people start misusing that infrastructure, then we are in a position where you're going to see a lot of backlash in cases from various sponsors. So thanks a lot.